you don't have the right answers yet. Like, just let that go. And as somebody who likes to get things right and who likes to win and who likes to achieve, that's a really hard thing to let go of. But there is no turn to page 5 to learn how to handle this situation. And so you're going to have to just be flexible and have grace with your people as you move through the season.
Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of Future Ready's Leading Through Unprecedented Times. Excited to have Amber Teamann here, principal in Texas. Amber, it is awesome to have you. Thanks for investing the time in us today. Can you take a moment and just introduce yourself, where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Amber Teamann. I'm the principal at Witt Elementary, which is in a suburb outside of Dallas. Witt is home to 680 of the cutest and smartest wolves in all of the land. And I'm super fortunate to be in a district that prioritizes relationships. It's coined the Wylie way, where we think that every student needs to have a relationship with an adult outside of their family that pours into them, invests in them, and just make sure that they're on the right path, so to speak, but also that there's more to it than just the academic. It's all about being good people in addition to being good students. So I'm really fortunate to be somewhere that I can also passionately give everything that I have.
And that right there is spoken like a passionate and true elementary principal in that intro, right? It is awesome to have you here. You know, Amber, and I admire your work online. I see the things that you post from your school. I see the way you continue to highlight kids and amplify the amazing community that you have. Let's take a moment to kick off and really reflect on this past school year. Obviously, your teachers were completely upended in the last couple of months. They were asked to do things very differently. Talk about some lessons learned, reflect on the end of the last year. Maybe what surprises did you have? Just kind of reflect for a few minutes, if you would, as how we closed out this past school year.
So this is my 5th year, and 5 years ago when I started as principal, I had all these grandiose, technically yours, Teamann, of being this digital, forward-thinking, forward-advancing, this is how we're going to do things, and boy, that went well. It was tragic and terrible. But to then now be where we are 5 years later, and to have watched my people over spring break is when we made that decision that we weren't going to be coming back. We were going to extend spring break, and then we didn't come back at all. To watch all of them be able to flip that switch and make these huge gains as a campus. Not one single one of my teachers were unable to connect, to dial down and figure out what really mattered the most, not only just curriculum, but relationships wise. Was incredible to see. And I don't know that I've ever been more proud to lead, and I say lead because I did nothing. They did everything. But for all of them to embrace this style and this flexibility, if I had asked and said, hey, y'all, let's do this, it could not have happened. But when we were faced with not having a choice, not only were we going to do it, but #we are Witt, and we're going to do it well. And they did. They stepped up. And I just am so proud of the individuals that parents have reached back out to me and said, hey, my kid was struggling and Mrs. Krim did this. Hey, my kid didn't know what was happening, and Miss Turner and her student teacher, they made this happen for her. And that is just tantamount to what we do as public educators. We weren't required to go above and beyond, but we did. And I don't know that there's a teacher that can say, well, I just took the last 9 weeks off, it was fine. None of our people have done that.
Yeah, and everything you just described isn't found in a contract. It's not something you can on evaluation. You can't rubric it to make it happen. You put educators' backs against the wall and watch out, because they will find a way and figure it out. And certainly what we've seen all across the country from educators. So let's talk for a minute about, some of the concerns we've seen online, some of the things parents are bringing. There's been a lot of articles written around this idea of learning loss, almost some looking at the last few months of the school year and say like, oh, look at this tragedy of like how much kids didn't learn and skill deficits, and is it now going to be a 5-month summer slide? And what, as a principal, obviously learning is core to the work that we do. It's part of our why and our purpose there. Yeah. So how are you all addressing that? What are you looking at from this idea around learning loss to make sure that we can address any gaps? What are we looking towards the summer, this coming school year? What's that going to look like? So how are you guys hitting that head on?
So first and foremost, any parent that have come with me with concerns, and a lot of our special education population, some of our students with greater needs, ideal situation is that we're not doing this. And so again, to those sweet mamas, I say, I recognize this is not the best way for your student to learn. I fully understand that it is increasingly more difficult as the weeks go by for you to get your student to be able to participate in anything, much less learn at the level they were learning face to face with my people. I get that. However, this is a worldwide pandemic. This isn't a Witt Elementary pandemic or a Wylie ISD pandemic. This entire nation is going to have to deal with the fact that we've missed out on the structure, on the support system, on the interventions, on the enrichment, on every single thing that we hold so true to growing our learners, because growth is a real big deal here. Prefacing that also too with the fact that I'm in a high socioeconomic area. So I know that my students aren't dealing with the challenges in a rural part of the world or country, in that I had 100% of my campus, all 680, participated in our online learning. And that is not something that everyone can say. That being said, again, growth, I have high achievers who also still needed that opportunity to be able to grow. When we come back in the fall, ideally with curriculum, and again, being a part of a smaller district means that we get to have some of those voices and conversations. They will start by spiraling in and reviewing where we left off that 9 weeks, just kind of feeling everything out and seeing where they are. We're going to slow down our introduction of new curriculum and content, really trying to build fundamentally spiraling where we can from where we left off that last 9 weeks, and then build from there. We'll still do all of our beginning of the year assessments. We're still going to measure reading levels. We're still going to use our MAP tests to evaluate that zone of proximal development immediately, recognizing that where we may have sat last year is not where we're going to sit this year. But that's what teachers do. They measure where kids are and figure out how to get them where they need to be. I think hearing from me, their boss, say, I don't anticipate next year's growth to be what we've seen in the past. We have expectations, and we have high expectations, especially here. And knowing that I don't expect them to perform miracles, but that every kid is going to grow, we're going to figure it out. And if that means we need Saturday school for enrichment, or if we need after school for interventions, whatever that looks like, hopefully they know and are going to hear me say regularly, I've got you. We're going to figure it out. We will take turns. We will make a plan. We will get it scheduled. Just really being able to take the time and not assume that because they did stuff online means that they're where they're supposed to be, but that it could have been mom helping, it could have been sister helping. They may not have understood it to the depth that we need them to, but really kind of introducing and yet also shoring up that foundation of what that expectation was for this last 9 weeks. That's our plan. I don't want them overthinking it. I don't want them stressed out about it. I don't want them feeling as if they've got to teach this year's content plus cover last year's material. Third grade teachers shouldn't teach second grade TEKS. I get that. However, again, worldwide pandemic. None of us meant to be in this place. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah, and taking that in stride, and well said there. And thank you for highlighting those things. You know, as we look towards next year, as you share, and here we are, we've reflected a little bit on this current year and this pandemic that we've all worked through. But as we think towards next year, states at this recording, states are really all over the place in terms of what they've said to districts, guidance that they've given. As we've looked towards next year, there's so many different facets of things that as a principal, you're trying to balance, from scheduling, all these what ifs. What if we can only have X number of kids in a given day? What does that look like? What are some of the things that you're looking at, considering? Obviously, we've got some time left before we're going to have to make final decisions, but what are you looking at from this idea around, you know, I hate calling it social distancing because I really think we need more social than ever before, but around physical distancing, or what's that going to look like at your school, or what are the things that you're really wrestling with right now?
I think for me, the biggest priority is making sure that my teachers, again, understand those expectations, and my people are rule followers. They are very black and very white, and so I have to be real careful with what I say, because they will bend over backwards trying to meet a stated or unstated expectation. So giving them that grace of understanding that, hey, nobody knows what we're doing. Like, I've got a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and at any given moment, that's going to become flexible. And you know, just even as a principal, that's kind of how it is anyway. I've got my hiring plan in January and my hiring plan in August, and those are two totally different beasts as to what I thought was going to happen. So recognizing for my own mental well-being, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to wait and see what they tell me, because nothing has been what they said it was going to be 30 days out. So recognizing that here in June, as we start to have some of those panic thoughts and panic conversations, because again, we all are trying to figure out how to do what it is that we're going to be asked to do, knowing that we still have time, and that there's still going to be changes that are made, and that if my people know I don't expect them to get it perfect, and that is not realistic, then I'm hoping we can start the year with just the regular amount of school year stress, not like above level pandemic stress, but that we'll figure it out. And if we get it wrong, then we'll fix it and we'll try again tomorrow. That's really been my mentality this whole entire time, is making sure that people are not wearing themselves down, whether it's emotional or physical or mental, and that there is no book, there is no rule, there is no bar of expectation. It's just that we're going to figure it out. If we get it wrong, that's okay. We can come back and reset and try again.
Yeah, so well said, especially from a principal leading so many people in that regard. So let's talk about professional learning. You know, as we reflected on this year, as you shared, our teachers' worlds were really flipped upside down. What has professional learning been what's been the focus area around professional learning for you all moving forward towards the fall? What do you anticipate? Has that changed at all for you? Talk to us about professional learning and what you're looking at.
So one of the things I've done every year as principal is I really believe in that everyone can grow and everyone can get better. And so I don't want to force feed all 70 of my staff members into learning and growing in the exact same way. So every year we've done a book study, and I give them a variety of titles to choose from, and based on their own self-assessment, they choose the title that they think best fits their needs for growth. So it can be academic, it can be social emotional learning, it can be personal and authentic, it can be whatever it is that they want it to be. They choose the book and we work through it as a staff. And then at the end of the year, there's some anecdotal evidence and some conversations that happen. Again, it ranges from classroom management to how to be more diverse and authentic in your classroom. It just has been very, very broad. Recognizing that everything that we do from this point forward is going to look different, I'm really trying to pull back on that. I want them to feel comfortable, and I want them to be able to, again, like I said, the way that they've taught the beginning of the year every single year is going to look different this year. And so I don't want to put something else on top of that that's going to stress them out. I feel like they have enough new on their plate right now that anything that I may have been thinking as an overarching theme for 2021, especially in the terms of PD, we're probably going to look at in January, and I'm going to let us get back to school in August and focus on delivering instruction in a new and unique way without also having something else hanging over their head. Now, in Texas, we have our T-Test, which is our teacher evaluation tool, and there's growth expectations for curriculum, and there's professional growth and expectations. Those things will still be true. But like I said, I'm a big believer. I share a lot of podcasts. I share a lot of articles every single week with my people. And so that's kind of how I baby step them into recognizing and evaluating change versus this is what we're going to do and everyone's going to read Innovator's Mindset and I expect to see it on Monday. I just don't operate that way. I want them to come to me and meet me halfway versus feeling as if they have to do something just because I saw it at a conference or I connected with so-and-so on Twitter and here we go. But I share your leadership videos. I share Joe Sanfilippo's walks to work. I share Angela Watson's podcasts. To me, those are all forms of PD. In fact, I'm working on a blog post right now of how professionals can own their own PD this summer when we don't know what else is going on. And so I think that that's important for people to recognize, is that there's that ownership for their own growth that doesn't necessarily need to be dictated by me, that I'm going to give you that grace of taking a deep breath and let's just figure out how to do our jobs.
Yeah, well, and kudos to you as an elementary principal. You're making me reflect on when I was an elementary principal and times that I didn't model what I expected from my own teachers. Times where I'd stand up in a faculty meeting and lecture for 60 straight minutes, essentially, and then the next day be talking to my teachers about making it more personal and differentiating and doing, and like not remotely leading in the way as the example of what I was asking them to do. And so hearing you talk about professional learning and hearing you're giving them voice, giving them choice, it's just another way as a leader of your modeling what you really want them to do for kids as well, with kid book selection and ways to do that as well. So kudos on that. So let's talk about equity for a moment. Equity is so core to the work at Future Ready Schools. I know you shared earlier, some of the struggles that you may have, or other districts, I should say, have. Maybe you don't maybe have as much of because of where you're at around the socioeconomic side of things. But whether I'm in suburban schools or urban schools, equity really has to be core to our work. And I know that's something that you value and that you agree with. So talk to us as a principal, how do you really prioritize our most vulnerable students, our most marginalized groups? What does that look like for you, especially moving forward?
So, especially given the current climate of where we are right now, again, here in early June, just the unrest that's happening across our nation, it is even more important to me because I do have a high socioeconomic campus that can become a priority, and it should be a priority. And I read something this past weekend that said it's not our primarily super diverse campuses that need to be talking about racial equity and inclusivity. It's the ones who don't look like that need to be doing that. So recognizing how very sensitive and trauma enforcing that could be, I'm actually working with several of our families right now to start maybe having roundtable discussions next year of what does this look like? How do we introduce this in a way that does not isolate or ostracize any of our populations, but encourages everyone to come together. I have a couple of really great families who have zero problems, and I mean this in the best way possible, of calling me out. And I have one of those awards up there is for being the Down Syndrome Educator of the Year for Dallas. And that is incredible to me because that mama on my behalf was able to speak so eloquently about the way that we've included our special needs population here on our campus. And I am a better principal because she is a mama at my school. And she asks me questions like, hey, Levi, and I, again, luckily she lets me speak about Levi. Hey, Levi goes to inclusion class with these groups of people, but he's only on the yearbook on his special education page. What does that look like? Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. You're right. That kid should be in both pages. He should be on his phase page. He should also be in that classroom with those peers that he does inclusion with. But I'd never thought that. And again, the lens of the people who don't look like me is so incredibly vital to the leader that I want to be. I have to be able to welcome in that criticism, those critical viewpoints. I had a mama say, hey, I loved your decor last year. We had a Western theme, right, for the brand. And I'm a big theme girl. Like a good t-shirt, like a good font, Tom, you know that. She said, I loved your photo ops. Did you notice that they both had blonde hair and the girls had blonde curl ringlets? My daughter couldn't take a picture behind that because then she was misappropriating a culture. And so she just didn't have that opportunity. And I was devastated because as much as I try so hard to be inclusive with my voice and my imagery and the things that come out of my campus, I missed that. I missed an opportunity for all the kids who didn't look like that little cowgirl and cowboy to be able to take a picture and feel as if they were a part of that as well. And again, I've let both of those families know, call me out. When you see those kinds of things, come to me. And they do it with such grace and they do it with such patience and recognition that I wasn't doing it overtly. But it just makes me such a better leader when I have people who say, hey, did you think about? Because I probably didn't, and I probably missed something.
Yeah, well, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. And I think we can all relate. And you're right. And due to the times that we have right now, there are so many good things happening in awareness and people making sure that every child feels included, whether it's the child with Down syndrome or the child from a different racial or ethnic background than many of our other students may look like. And so at the end of the day, we both agree that it's a non-negotiable that all of those childs need to feel included and be an active part and to leverage those voices of groups that may not be at the table that need to be at the table. And so thank you for your vulnerability with that. Thank you for sharing with that. Let me ask you a couple quick more questions here if I could. One of the things I really appreciate about your work is you are such a relationship oriented person, and that just really oozes in everything that you do. Besides, you're the author of Lead with Appreciation per se. How do we keep human connection core to the work that we do, relationships core to the work that we do, especially in this environment? How do we keep relationships at the heart of decision making?
I think remembering that this is not the Amber Teamann Elementary, but that this is Witt Elementary. I think remembering that I am not always right and that I always don't necessarily know best. I have purposefully hired an assistant principal who challenges me in the best way possible, someone who is willing to say, let's think that through, or have you thought about, or hey, I had this idea. Recognizing that leadership doesn't just mean getting your way and bossing people around. I think that because I told you so is a terrible leadership strategy, and opening those conversations to be more collaborative. And I tell my people all the time, I have spoken at length that 71% of my teachers my first year as principal wanted to work somewhere else. That was a staggering and sombering fact when that end of the year climate survey came out. And I have worked so incredibly hard since then to make sure my people know I need your input. I need your value. We have the Gallup survey here in Wylie ISD that we've gotten to get to know everybody's strengths. And so outside of their door, they have their top 5 strengths. My leadership team did the Enneagram study a couple of years ago. And so we all learned our Enneagram numbers, and we've really done some soul searching and some personal reflection on what that brings to the table and how it takes all of these different strengths to balance out and make a fully functioning team. If I hired an assistant principal who just was going to tell me yes all the time, I was going to make the same mistakes over and over and over again because they weren't able to have those open conversations with me. I think being able to hear that you're wrong and to recognize that there are other ways to do things. Ultimately, I can still choose to do it my way, but we are a better campus when all of it, #we are wit, not Amber is wit. And so hopefully for those who have been here with me and have seen this continuum of leadership, they recognize now I value them coming to the table and asking questions. I value their ideas and want to empower them. Within the last 2 years, 16 of my staff members that have moved on, I think 14 of them have been promoted. And part of that comes from me encouraging and pushing and empowering them to make choices, to make decisions, sharing out their work, making sure their voices are heard, not because I'm a great boss, but because they're truly incredible people and should have all those opportunities and experiences. And that really, I think, is probably, other than student learning, the most important thing that I can do here is to make sure my people feel confident and valued, and that now can be at a district level. That's pretty awesome.
That is. And, the diversity and the lenses that you're talking about truly bring that strength to a team and that inclusive feel to a team, which is absolutely vital and needed. So let me ask you one final question. As we head into this coming school year, lots of unknowns still out there, lots of fear still out there. Give a piece of advice, if you would, to school and district leaders as they embark on a new year.
You don't have the right answers yet. Just let that go. And as somebody who likes to get things right and who likes to win and who likes to achieve, that's a really hard thing to let go of. But there is no turn to page 5 to learn how to handle this situation. And so you're going to have to just be flexible and have grace with your people as you move through this season. Talking about that Enneagram, I knew right away to call my 6s, my Enneagram 6s, who are the worrywarts and who are the ones who stress. And so those are the first people that I called to reassure, to say, hey, there is no right way to do this. We can't get this wrong. We can always do it better, but we can't get it wrong. If we're trying to connect with our kids and trying to connect with our families, it's going to be okay. So I think for a school leader who feels as if this position means, this chair means I'm supposed to have all the answers and answer everything right as soon as it's asked, if they could let go of that pressure for themselves, it's going to then release that pressure on their staff and their families, and be willing to say, hey, we're going to figure it out. What we do today might not be what we do tomorrow, and it might not be what we do 6 months from now, but together we're going to figure it out.
That's Amber Teamann, everybody. Amber, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it, and keep leading the way.
Thanks for having me, Tom.